Wouldn't it be nice to have that clarity in business where you can see exactly the path forward and exactly the right steps to take? James Beardsley found it in Austrian Economics, and he explains for the benefit of the rest of us.
This is the Economics for Entrepreneurs podcast, a project of the Mises Institute, applying the principles of economics to start, grow, and manage your business. For free tools, resources, key takeaways, and actionable insights from each episode, visit Mises.org/E4EPod. Now, here's Hunter Hastings.
Hi, Hunter Hastings here. One of the most productive fields for the implementation of the Austrian entrepreneurship techniques that we favor here is professional services. This field embraces lawyers, accountants, consultants, human resources, healthcare services, even some areas of IT services. They all require knowledge intensity, often to the extent of specific professional and academic credentials that take years of investment. Often, although not always, professional services are less intense than other businesses in their capital utilization. So the barriers to entry are knowledge, expertise, and administrative governance, more so than capital and incumbent market share. In other words, you can start a professional services business straight out of law school or out of college with the right accountancy degree, or you can quickly establish your professional role in healthcare with your nursing or other medical degree or qualification. Historically, it may be fair to say that professional services were viewed more as vocations than entrepreneurial businesses. But the opposite is the case today. These are fields of economic activity and economic growth conducted at high levels of commercial activity. Professional services firms can be big and global, and they can be small and local, and lively and creative and adaptable. In all cases, they're entrepreneurial. That means seeking out dissatisfactions and needs to be addressed and developing new and better ways to address them. As we discuss frequently on Economics for Entrepreneurs, there are many ways to implement improvements and innovations and to provide better service than competitors. In professional services, it might not be in the core product. After all, the law is the law, and accounting is bounded by standards, and there are limitations on product innovation. The technology of service delivery is one frequent path to innovation. The latest trend, of course, being automation, providing accounting services through software, for example. Software is a great way to apply fixed general rules to an individual's personal circumstances, and it's a great business model when the customer inputs the data. And there's another general point there. Innovating in business models is one way that professional services firms can bring new thinking into an arena which is not otherwise highly open to innovation. It's happening in the legal field as well as accounting. Many of you are no doubt familiar with LegalZoom, which takes the mundane and repeatable functions of law firms, like registering corporations or making wills or applying for a trademark, and centralizes and automates or semi-automates the process, keeping an administrative calendar and reminding you when administrative action is required. Another form of business model innovation in the legal field is business development. Every law firm needs clients, and as we've covered here at Economics for Entrepreneurs, sourcing clients requires the design and implementation of a complete system, from identifying and targeting a precise audience with specific wants, reaching and communicating with that audience via an empathic value proposition, and stimulating a customer's evaluation process in which your firm can succeed because of superior understanding of the need, superior technical and professional knowledge of how to address the need, the right value proposition, and the best individual relationship skills. Today we're talking with James Beardsley, owner and operator of a successful law firm who worked hard at mastering the skills of running his law firm as a successful entrepreneurial business. In his research devoted to that challenge, he discovered Austrian economics, and most importantly, discovered how Austrian economics could make him a better and more successful business person and business leader. Let's talk to James and learn from him. James, hello.
Well, hello. How are you, Hunter?
I'm good, and thank you for joining us at Economics for Entrepreneurs. And you're a successful entrepreneur, the kind we love to talk to, and specifically, you're the leader of a very successful legal practice.
Well, you're very generous. Thank you. But yeah, we're a small business that's been doing fairly well over the last few years, and I just wanted to thank you for doing the this type of podcast and the program that you do, Economics for Entrepreneurs. It's a wonderful thing, and it's been a long time I've wanted to see somebody do something like this. So thank you for what you're doing.
Well, we're the ones to thank you, but we appreciate that, and our goal is to help entrepreneurs, James. And you told me at one point that you realized to be successful that you should look at your law firm as an entrepreneurial business. It should be managed along entrepreneurial lines, and perhaps that was not typical or mainstream in legal practices at the time. So maybe you could tell us what you were thinking and what influences got you to that point.
Sure, I'd be happy to talk about that a little bit. In the legal industry, there's a notion that legal businesses are practices, which is true. I have a law practice, but I felt, as I started learning a little bit about the way money worked and investing and running a business, that running a law practice as a business not only was good for the owner, but also the employees, and more importantly, the clients. To run a firm as a business in an efficient way, and to look at it as a business that provides value to its customers, and is successful by doing that better and better, was really what I was learning early on, that it's just better for everybody, including the clients. So that's what got me started, was seeing how successful businesses were run, both by looking at investing as I was a young attorney, saving some money and investing with my wife, to seeing how a law firm worked from the inside. I think more and more people are understanding the value of running a law practice with a real eye on understanding that it really is a business.
Yeah. So we'll get into some of the details, James, but it's really interesting at the general level. So I know we're going to talk about some specifics. What would you summarize as the difference, and maybe it's attitudinal, maybe it's in your mind or your approach, between running it as a business and running it as a practice? How would you summarize that?
Well, by the nature of a practice, it is a business, and I think ignoring that fact is you do it at your own peril. I certainly have seen extremely good lawyers who are much better lawyers than myself, have very unsuccessful businesses because they ignore the fact that, at the end of the day, you have to pay payroll, you have to get clients in the door, you have to put your resources together in a way that works. I guess that's the way I think about it, because you really don't have a choice. If you run a law practice and ignore the bottom line, you're not going to be in business very long.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's explore one other introductory kinds of question, and that is that you also told me when we've been talking in the past that as you were investigating business practices and how to run a business, you encountered Austrian economics, and you found that was helpful in your business considerations as well. So tell our listeners about that discovery process and why you thought Austrian economics was going to be useful for you in business.
Yeah, great question. It was just kind of by chance that it happened, actually. I was reading a lot of things about investing, a lot of what Warren Buffett had written in his early years about understanding what makes businesses work, and some of the concepts of successful businesses. And almost by chance, I heard an Austrian economist on the television talking about some of the exact same things and exact same concepts, but in a way that was much clearer, almost as if it was scientific rather than just running a business by feel. And it really interested me. And you know, the guy said, you know, the Austrians have been writing about this for, you know, whatever, a decade or a century. And so I started poking around because it was something that always had interested me so much, and read a couple of the real basic books on Austrian economics. And it answered so many questions in such a very simple way that it just made me feel like I could see the world in a much clearer way, understand how businesses worked in a much more logical way. And I think just the logic and the basic understanding of breaking it down to the basic elements and then building up what happens, whether it's in a business or an economy, was just so helpful for me to see. And then I just started reading Austrian economics texts.
Good. Well, that's one of our key themes, that Austrian economics helps business people. So we're looking forward to learning from you here, James.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't pretend to be an economist. You know, so my understanding of Austrian economics is based on just what I've read, and I've read a number of the texts, but I'm certainly not an expert at all.
No, we don't ask you to be an expert. We ask you to use the principles, and I think that's
exactly
probably what you've done. So let's start with business as growth, James. You decided your law firm is not going to be just a business, it's a growth business. You're not going to wait for the phone to ring or clients to walk through the door. You're going to drive the growth, and that often includes marketing, and marketers and lawyers haven't traditionally been the same thing. So did you think of yourself as an entrepreneur, as a marketer, and is that a kind of personality, a driving personality, or where did that come from, driving growth?
Yeah, so when I shifted into the current law firm that I am currently at, which we specialize in car accident cases for injured people, I was just amazed at how good quality work the firm was doing, and you know, realized just kind of logically that you know, one of the things that could simply make us more successful is making people aware of our services. And not only would it make us better off, but it would bring a great service to people who need those services. So, you know, marketing is a extremely important thing to my business. It's really what drives essentially everything, because it drives the new cases in the door. But I think of it as just simply one part of the whole mix, and it's a critical part. And you know, it was obvious to me that so many people that need the type of services that we specialize in were not able to find qualified representation. They couldn't even find any attorneys, simply because they don't know where to go, they don't know what to do, they don't know who to talk to. And by communicating with those people and telling them that this service is available to you, really is really all marketing is about, from our perspective, or primarily what it's about, is just reaching out to people that are oftentimes just completely ignored. And I saw an opportunity there.
Yep. So you've identified a very precise target audience, as we would say in marketing terms, and a very precise client problem. The next step in the journey we always talk about is the value proposition. What are they looking for, and what are they not getting, or what are they feeling they can't get from other sources, or as you say, maybe it's just lack of awareness. But how do you frame your firm's value proposition? Why do Why do you say that customers or clients can find a better value from you versus an alternative source?
Sure. So, one thing that Austrian Economics helped me really understand was different people have very different value scales. And their value scales can change over time, and they can change by a specific event. So 99% of the population does not need the legal services of a car accident attorney.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as they do, it becomes extremely urgent. It's time sensitive, and it's not something that people have thought about before. And so understanding that the majority of people out there are going to have different lives. They're going to have things that are important to them that I may not totally understand. They may be, in fact, many people are right on the edge financially, living paycheck to paycheck. And if all of a sudden they're not getting paid for a couple of weeks, their life is radically different, and they have huge problems that need to be solved and need to be solved right away. And just simply having the understanding and the concept of accepting that every person is different, every person has value scales, and what may be important to one person may not be important to somebody else. But as soon as they need our services, I don't know if elasticity of demand is really the right concept, but they need it, and they need it right away. Mm-hmm. And so reaching that person at that particular time is what's important to us. So I really try to think about it in those terms, and it's been very successful. Really thinking about it from the customer's perspective in terms of what they're thinking, what they believe that they need, and simply accepting that's what they want, that's what they need, that's what they're looking for. That's what I'm going to provide them. That's the service I'm going to give because that's what they want to buy. Not as much what I want to force on them, but what do they need? Do they need somebody right now that can understand their situation and tell them, hey, everything's going to be okay? That's important to a lot of people. Do they need to get into a rental car right away? That's important to a lot of people. Do they have a real serious injury that's life-changing and they're scared for their future? And telling that person, here's what can happen, and we can make this better for you. So really thinking about it from the customer's perspective and their particular value scale is what matters to me.
Thanks, James. Now let's take a quick break from talking about your journey to talk about our listeners' entrepreneurial journeys. James just explained to us his value proposition, or put more simply, his pitch to a prospective customer about how their lives will be better after doing business with his firm. Creating and fine-tuning your value proposition is just one stage on the entrepreneurial journey. And as James explains, Austrian economics knowledge gave him a major advantage at every stage. From thinking about how to turn your skills into a business, all the way to growing and managing a global company, applying the principles of Austrian economics makes you a smarter, more effective decision maker and a better entrepreneur. My new course, available at e4epod.com/journey, teaches you how to activate key principles of Austrian economics, which we discuss every week with guests on this podcast, to help you become the most effective Austrian entrepreneur you can be at every stage of the journey. Again, that's the letter E, the number 4, letter E, pod.com/journey. I hope to see you there. Now back to our conversation with James. Well, that's really deep, I think, James, and you've touched on two points that we're constantly emphasizing. One is customer sovereignty or consumer sovereignty, and let them lead the way. They have to direct the decisions about what services they need and so on. The other one is empathy, which is, the fancy economic term for what you've just described, trying to understand their personal individual needs. Did you find that empathy was a process or a skill that you could get better at, or is it just something natural that comes to you?
Well, that's a great question. I don't know if I've ever really thought about it before. I certainly think I have gotten much better at it. And I think that really comes down to, just understanding what's important to that person and realizing that, they don't want to have a lawyer come in and talk to them about legal jargon and this and that. They want certain things from me, and they want to know certain things, and I'm gonna listen to them, try to understand what's important to them, and try to solve the problem that's most important to them. And I that's just the way I think about it, and I really try to be empathetic because it's so many of my clients are going through a life-changing event that is just critically important to them, to just let them know that there's somebody there that cares about them, that's gonna try to help them, is something that really makes a huge difference to them. It takes a huge weight off their shoulders. But more importantly, not necessarily more importantly, but it also has a huge effect later on, 6 months later, when I'm talking to them about resolving their case or something that has come up that's been unexpected. It builds a relationship with that person, somebody I've never met before, and I understand them better if I can empathize with their situation, and they trust the advice that I give them if they know that right from the beginning, they're working with somebody that truly cares about them and their situation and what's important to them.
Yeah. Well, that's a lovely example of what Peter Klein has called on this podcast in the past, empathic diagnosis. So, as you say, you really try to listen to them and understand them. And one of the hard parts about that, James, is gauging their feelings. So, as you say, they may be feeling pretty jarred after their automobile accident, and they're not sure of the legal field, and you've got to gauge their feelings. Are you giving them confidence? Are they feeling that they can trust you? Do you find you're able to judge that, to find that point where, yes, I've gained the trust of this client?
Sure. Well, and something it took me a little while to understand, but so many people, when they go through something traumatic in their life, they've never dealt with something like this before, and they don't know how to react. They're feeling a lot of emotions, whether it's denial, if it's a wrongful death case and a loved one has passed away. It can be anger. They can be extremely angry at the person who has changed their life. They can almost always are very frustrated because they don't understand how the system works, and they've run up against some sort of roadblock that is stopping them from moving forward. And understanding that people go through a series of emotions, and that person that I talked to 1 week after their accident is not often the exact same person that they will be 6 months later. And helping them and accepting the emotional state that they're in, and working with them and guiding them has just been, critically important. And I have certain staff that deals with our clients on a very regular basis, and we train them to understand those series of emotions and embrace the emotions. You can have a client that's very frustrated and angry, and it seems like they're angry at you, but they're not really. They're just frustrated, and embracing that and working with them and accepting their emotions and working them through to a successful conclusion has been something that's been really helpful to us.
You said something really interesting there that I was going to ask about, and that is, can you train people in that empathic process? And it sounds like you can, and you do. Can you shed some light on that? The training process. How do you do that?
You can train some people, I think. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that you can train everybody. For example, when we have our first encounter with someone who's gone through a very serious accident, and they maybe broke their leg and have just had surgery, a few days ago, there's a lot of information that we need in terms of the what, when, where, who, that sort of thing. But doing it in an order and in a way where we show compassion for that person, and an understanding that, hey, are you okay now? How are you doing now? What are the doctors saying to you, about the next several weeks? Those sorts of things that just immediately tell the caller, hey, these people care about me, because we do care about them. We have to get a certain type of information. We have to get some information, and we try to do it in a way where they understand that that they're more than just a caller. They're more than just a case. We want to, quote unquote, sell them what they're trying to buy, which is somebody that will help them, but that will also make it a process that is as pleasant as it can be. It's an unpleasant process, but we can do a number of things to make it a little bit easier for them. So in terms of training, we call it a script, where on every call, the person that talks to the person initially expresses empathy for what the person is going through. Mm-hmm. We have, with our current clients, we have a 7-point system where there are 7 points that they go through with the person every time, just to touch base with them, find out what the key pressure points are in their life. How is their medical condition going? Is there anything we can do for you? And talk to them in a way where, they understand that we care what they're going through.
Yeah. Well, you have a particularly acute and specialized and demanding form of the empathic diagnosis. So I hope people listening can take some of the general principles from that process, even if their clients may not be quite in the same emotional situation.
Yeah, and just to give you an example, I mean, in the legal profession, that concept just so often seems to be ignored, where the communication from the lawyer is really based on the lawyer's perspective as, oh, there's nothing I can do for you right now. Why don't you just wait till I give you a call back? Or the person calls in, that person that is reaching out for help because their life has been completely turned upside down, and they're told, okay, I'll set up a phone call with you for next Thursday with the lawyer. It really, those sorts of things, looking at it from the customer's perspective, have just been huge for us. And it's not the most convenient thing in the world, but we do it because it makes a difference.
Yeah. You said you can't train necessarily everybody in the empathic process. If you dial it back to hiring, have you been able to develop any hiring techniques that help you get the people that fit that need?
Well, that is a good question. We're growing, and we're constantly hiring and trying to hire right now. So it's not the greatest market to be finding new employees, particularly where I am. The job market is pretty full employment. So we try to find people who demonstrate those skills, I guess. But it's hard. It's hard finding good employees. So we don't hesitate to get rid of people who don't demonstrate those skills. And that's really hard to do. And it's, it's costly to get rid of somebody. But long term, I think the long-term benefits of doing it when you need to outweigh the short-term pain.
Yeah. We've been talking a lot about the necessary task of assembling the right resources, in this case, the right people, and being flexible enough that if they're not right for the situation, you have to make a change. Now, obviously, that's a principle and it's difficult to do in human terms, but from an economic standpoint, it's right. You got to assemble the right resources. Let's move on to business development. James, you've developed some techniques, including advertising and other kinds of business development tools. And that addresses the problem of lack of awareness from potential clients aren't aware of the services available to them. What's been your experience in the field of business development and advertising specifically? For example, do you use TV ads or radio ads, or have you gone digital? How do you approach it?
Yeah, great question. So our primary advertising is television ads. I purchased the firm about 6 years ago, and I've been here for 13 years, but the law firm has been advertising on television for over 30 years. So I've been able to learn just from historical information and what I've been doing, the types of things that work, and what works better than other things, and really just allocating the firm's resources to those things that work. I find, just the way my mind works, we need to do things simply. So we have a very simple marketing plan that focuses, as much of our resources as possible on the things that work best. We do a lot of television advertising. We do direct mail, it's understanding the alternatives. A lot of people do internet advertising. We do a little bit of it to complement our branding. But I've got 30 or 40 competitors out there that are advertising on the internet. So if somebody's online searching for a lawyer, I'm going to be one of 30 or 40. Whereas if I can reach them on the television, I'm one of 3 or so. Yep. So the odds are much better. Really just try to keep it as simple as possible with what works. And I've found television and to some extent direct mail have worked well. It's just a way to reach people. The idea that, there was an advertising book that I found on the Mises.org website in defense of advertising. Mm-hmm. And I read it, and it gave me, just gave me confidence in what I'm doing, and really the real value that advertising has to our community, our industries, and promoting competition and providing services to people who might not otherwise get it. I have been overwhelmed by how appreciative and thankful some people are when they get my direct mail piece and call, and I provide them exactly what they need. They need help. I don't know that I ever would have done that had it not been for reading Austrian Economics, in particular in defense of advertising. Yeah. So it just makes me feel confident about myself and what we're doing, and that they're really providing value to so many people.
Well, let me unwrap a number of things there that you've said that are very telling. One is you talk about what works. What's your metric or your measure for that? Is it reach, the number of people you reach? Is it responses? Is it actual cases that come in the door? Is it revenues? What do you think about when you say it works?
Sure. Well, ultimately, it's about producing revenue and how much it costs to produce that revenue. Mm-hmm. Looking at how much a certain program costs, direct mail is very inexpensive. It does not produce a lot of cases, but it produces a number of cases that we can calculate, after a year or so, how much revenue those cases have brought in compared to how much it costs. It's a good ratio. Television, on the other hand, is very expensive, but it produces a lot of cases. We just get more bang for our buck. So we, ultimately we look at what is the cost of the case, what is the average value of the case, and something else that it really became clear to me is the amount of time that goes by between when we open the case and when we realize our revenue. We get paid at the end of the case. So a $100,000 case that I'm able to resolve in 6 months is worth a lot more than a $100,000 case that resolves in 3 years. And just simply understanding and realizing that has made a huge difference for us. It's really helped us focus not just our advertising, but really our whole practice on understanding how that flow of money works, and how expensive cases are. Some cases are very expensive, and if you've got a $250,000 case that you settle, that sounds good. But if it takes you 8 years to settle it, and you've got to put $50,000 of your money into it, it's not a great deal.
Yeah.
So really trying to think through what's really happening, has been helpful. And I'm sorry if I'm getting too much into the weeds about my business. I love what I do, and sometimes get thinking about it a little bit too deeply.
No, absolutely. This is terrific because there's a lot of learning here. So if I look through the Austrian entrepreneurship lens, understanding time and the value of time and the cost of time is very important in Austrian economics, and that it's thought of as the production process or Hayek's production triangle, but it's about the time of production, and the longer it takes, as you say, that's a very, very expensive. And then also the focus on cash flow, which we understand better, I think, in Austrian economics than other people understand. So tell us about that cash flow management. That sounds pretty tricky. So here you are identifying a case, you're setting up a case, you could maybe estimate how long it's going to take, but you don't know when the revenue is going to come in, and yet you're spending on the costs in current time. So how do you think about cash flow management specifically?
Yeah, boy, that's if there's anything I think that has helped me, it's really been just the way I think about cash flows. And we're just to some degree, it's very unpredictable. Sometimes large cases will get resolved much faster than you think. I'm in the process of trying to resolve a case that I had slated to resolve almost a year ago, and it still isn't resolved yet. So our cash flow is all over the place. It's not unusual for me to settle 2 or 3 of my biggest cases of the year within the course of 2 or 3 months. So we make a lot of money in a few months and then tread water for periods of time. I've certainly had periods of time where I haven't had quote unquote profit for several months. So having a cash reserve has been something that's been hugely important. I mean, people think I'm nuts when I talk to them about the fact that I have no debt, and I have a very large amount of cash in my operating account. But reading, I think it was Rothbard in Man, Economy, and State about the reserve demand, having demand, and I certainly there's a big demand that I have for having that flexibility in my cash flow, to have cash there if an opportunity comes along, or if I have a period of 6 months that's I'm settling all little cases. It doesn't affect my decision-making process as much as it would if I was really short on cash and trying to scrape around for settling some bigger cases to get money in the door. It's been hugely helpful.
Yeah.
And just understanding that there's nothing wrong with having no debt and cash that's just sitting in your bank account has just given me confidence to not worry about if I'm doing something wrong there. Some people say, oh, you should invest your money and have a line of credit. And, maybe for some businesses, that's the way to go. I'm sure it is. But for what I do, the cash flows are so unpredictable. It's just served me well to manage our cash that way. Something that I've seen, previously before I owned my firm, and also a number of other people I know that do what I do, is the notion that debt leads to making bad decisions. If you have the ability to take on debt, and you do so it warps your way of thinking about what you're really purchasing and what the alternative use of the money would be. And I find if I'm buying something with cash, I am forced to think about, hey, what would the value to my business be if I took that same amount of money and put it into more advertising or put it into hiring another employee. Debt has been something that the idea that Austrian Economics taught me about what debt does to the decision-making process has been really important.
Where do you get that from? That the role of debt? Do you remember where you started to pick up that in Austrian economics?
Well, I don't remember where. I remember the example, though. You probably will know. The idea of driving around and seeing a half-done large construction project.
Yep, that's Mises.
That's Mises. Okay. Yeah. And every now and then I'll see that, and it makes me chuckle because it makes me understand, why that probably happened. If I see a large hotel that's halfway done somewhere or something, it's just been very helpful way to think about things. Somebody else gave the example, it may not have been an Austrian, but debt is like playing Russian roulette with a revolver. 5 times out of 6, it works great for you. Yeah. But you can only handle it for so long. So.
Yeah. Well, I just want to underline something that you've captured here about. We talk about managing uncertainty, and the future's uncertain, and that's a nebulous kind of academic concept. And you're looking at it in very real life terms. Your cash flow is uncertain because of the nature of your business. Well, how do you manage uncertainty? Well, 2 ways are having a cash reserve so that you're never going to be disconcerted if the timing is different than you expected, and being out of debt so you always have that cash flexibility. So those are examples of managing uncertainty, and it's a great example.
Yeah, and I can give you a couple other ones that I think so many people, even a lot of lawyers, just don't really understand about the type of business that we do. Is you can, from the outset, you can understand whether a case is going to be resolved in a short period of time or a long period of time, and you can choose what cases you handle. And so it's not hard for me to say, hey, this might be a good case, but it might end up turning into a 6-year problem. And so we've really specialized handling almost exclusively car accident cases where there's no question about who is responsible for the accident. Mm-hmm. And what that's done is it's taken a huge amount of risk out of the equation because there's really not the possibility of losing the case. The question really becomes, how do you increase the value of the case? When does the case get resolved, and how much does it get resolved for? So you take out the possibility of getting a 0 on that case. Mm-hmm. And I think of that, the stages of production as really risk. If you're setting up a business that, like mine, where you get paid at the end and you're getting paid 4 years out on average, that's a lot more risky than if you're getting paid, 2 years out. Right. So I am constantly looking for ways of limiting risk.
Yeah. Good. The other principle that you mentioned, you didn't use the term, but you mentioned the way of thinking is opportunity cost, thinking about if I use this money for X, it means I can't use it for Y, and is that the right decision? So I think you've done a lot of that opportunity cost thinking, isn't that right?
Yeah, and I do. I always find myself just thinking, what's the alternative? Mm-hmm. And it really makes a difference to think about it that way. If you put it in terms of, in my mind, oftentimes I find myself saying, well, would we be better off, putting this $10,000 into more television advertising? And that gives me a frame of reference because I know in my mind how much that's worth versus do I buy a $10,000 more expensive car that doesn't produce anything for me, but it's a little bit more pleasant for me to drive to work in. But yeah, just always looking at alternatives, and it's not just monetary, but it's putting together that mix of your resources. Do you hire another person, or do you advertise more? Do you open a branch office, or do you invest in new software? There's just always alternatives to look at. Along the same lines, one thing that was really, really helpful to me was looking at it in a sense of reality, not what do I want the world to be like, what do I want the market to look like, but how is it? What is it really like? Right now, we have a problem with we don't have a lot of qualified people that are looking for jobs. That's a reality. I can complain about it, but I'm not going to go out and try to change the world. I'm not going to go out and try to change the market. I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to respond to it, and I'm going to find a way to be more efficient, whether it's through finding a software that I can invest in where I can make my current employees more productive, or some other way to address that and to solve that problem is really looking at the alternatives. So, I don't think about it as an economist. I think about it as a business owner struggling with the realities of running the business every day.
Yeah. Well, it's one and the same thing that Thomas Sowell has a nice definition of economics, and that is it's the allocation of scarce resources that have alternative uses. So you got to figure out what those alternative uses are and make the decision. You mentioned software there, James, and I'm not a lawyer, but I read about technology making a big difference in law practices and law businesses. Some of it can be automated, and there's reg tech now, regulation technology, and there's document analytics using artificial intelligence. What do you see in the technology front, and how do you make decisions about investing in technology?
Boy, that's a good question because that's not my strong point. And because it's not my strong point, I've tried to keep things as simple as possible, which actually has worked. But it's something I'm currently working on. In fact, the reason why I gave that example is because I want to get a more powerful software that can do the things that we needed to do. Along the same lines, the institutional, I don't know if that's the right term, but the knowledge base that employees have in terms of what the economists call the recipes of how things work is just as powerful. And formulating processes that work and having people specialize in the things that they can do best makes everybody much more efficient. We try to use our technology to operate more effectively and efficiently. And in fact, something we've started doing recently that's been very successful is, I live in a very rural state, and we have clients that are sometimes 4 or 5 hours away. And doing electronic signatures is something that really wasn't done very often several years ago, and we're doing it more and more, and it's really added a value both to us, so we don't have to spend that time in the car or send something via mail. We can just do it electronically, and the clients love it, the ones that can do it, because they can call me and sign the documents that they need to get things started right away. So those sorts of things, and there's always new software. Of course, it's always very expensive too. One thing I always keep in the back of my mind is one of the secrets, I think, to success is making decisions on what things you choose not to do, because there are so many quote unquote silver bullets out there that everybody's trying to sell in terms of the next great thing. So I try to just try to be as simple as possible.
Yeah. But one of the things that we try to emphasize in making those decisions is asking the question, does it create value for the client? And you mentioned the document signing software, which I think clearly improves the experience for the client. It's easier, it's simpler, there's a lot of confidence in it, it's well established. So is that a good principle that you can follow in technology decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure, if it provides value to the client, it makes their life better off. It satisfies, gets them something that they need. If it also makes the business owner's life easier, it's a win-win for everybody. And that's really that whole notion that both sides are better off by a transaction is so true, and that's of course the whole point of being in business, is to provide somebody something of value, and they get more value than they give up, and both sides do, because it just makes both sides' lives better off. So yeah, and it makes for a better business.
Yeah, I know. I often worry about whether we communicate that well enough in economics. And, there's a lot of young people who have been brainwashed to say that business is exploitative, and the exact opposite's the case. It's a win-win for both sides. And we have to do a better job of communicating that.
Yeah, there's a very small, short book called Not a Zero-Sum Game. I don't know if it's on the Mises website, but I read it early on, and it talks about the division of labor and that whole process of making everybody better off by the economic process, and it's so true. It really is, and it's satisfying when I'm able to really help somebody who needs help. And it benefits me and my employees, but also gives that customer something that they so desperately need. And I see that every day.
Yep. Well, let's see, James, if we can wrap up your thinking about Austrian economics in a nice little bow to close here. You talk about it a lot as a way of thinking, and thinking with a deductive method that is, you said, scientific, I think. You talked about applying principles like opportunity cost. Can you tell us about that, about Austrian economics as a way of thinking? Is that the right way to express it?
I do. I think, for me, it was almost like putting on a pair of glasses and being able to see better. Mm-hmm. Everything is still out there, but what was kind of blurry and maybe didn't make total sense, all of a sudden, okay, I understand that a little better now. It makes sense. It's the way the world is. It gave me confidence to think about what we're doing on a daily basis in a way that makes sense. And to think about things in the alternative, to think about, putting team members together in a way that is most efficient and effective, so they can be better off, but also provide a better service. Thinking about what we're really providing, and we need to do more than just be good lawyers. We need to be able to communicate our services so people are aware that the service is available to them. And just thinking about, the way the world works and the way our industry works, it just has been so helpful to me. Good.
Well, thank you very much for sharing those thoughts and reflections and analyses. Are there any books or authors or readings that you particularly remember or that stand out to you or had the most effect on you? Do you have any favorites?
Well, I would have to say that Man, Economy, and State was, I think, what really did it for me. It was simple. I read Human Action afterwards, but Man, Economy, and State was just simple, straightforward, and it just made sense. It's very big. It's very thick. I think it was really helpful that I read some of the more basic, not basic, but thinner books, summaries of Austrian economics. But certainly, Rothbard's writing in Man, Economy, and State I think really it was just amazing and so helpful.
Well, James, thank you very much for sharing all of that knowledge with us today, and congratulations on your practice. Do you want to tell people where to go to find you, or not?
Sure, I can. But first, thank you for what you're doing, Hunter. I appreciate what you do and think it's great. And wish everybody the best of luck.
Good,
So I run a law firm my law firm is Lowry and Associates, and we're in Maine. And we handle cases all over the state. I do also handle some cases in other states, depending on the situation. And thank you so much, Hunter. Appreciate it.
Good. Is there a website address that people could find?
Sure. So the website is lowrylaw.com. That's LOWRYLAW.com.
Good. Well, James, once again, thank you. You're a great example of what we're trying to do, which is apply economic principles to business success, and you're doing that. So I thank you.
Economics for Entrepreneurs is a production of the Mises Institute. To explore more content like this, visit Mises.org. That's MISES.org. You can follow Hunter Hastings at hunterhastings.com.